WV Uncommonplace. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts. Along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episodes. The Uncommonplace digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to our uncommon place.
Hey everybody, this is JR from West Virginia Uncommonplace, and I am here to tell you about Anchor Nebula and their Go Anywhere series of projectors. They are some of the best projectors you can use when you're on the go, going camping, just even around the house. And these models include the Capsule 2, the Capsule 3 laser, and the brand new Mars 3. So definitely take time to go out and grab one of these projectors, and you will be immersed in an experience that you're not going to get anywhere else. Remember, Anchor Nebula is the way to go. Hey everybody, welcome to West Virginia Uncommonplace. I am JR, and I'm here to tell a story that's kind of wild. As much of a fan as I am of Super Mario, there's one game, and I'm not talking about the CDI games, because I actually owned and had a CDI and played those games. It's one Mario game that has escaped me playing it for some reason. And that one game is Super Mario RPG. Now, I will tell you this story based on a few things. Now, one being Square, which is the people that developed the game, which are famous for Final Fantasy, and Nintendo, and the year being 1996. And the thing was that this is the first RPG in the Super Mario series, and if you don't count the Paper Marios, I consider it the only one besides a remake that's coming out this year, which is going to turn my attention to asking the audience and other people, should I even play the original one if I'm going to play the remix? And like I said before, the Paper Mario RPG games, you can consider them whatever you want. And it is just one of these things that just, it kind of threw me for a loop. And this was the last game that Square made for for Nintendo. So going into further detail, I gotta add something else in here so this makes sense to anybody. The year was 1996. 1996 in video gaming was a completely different atmosphere for me. I had moved on to the 32-bit gaming. I had put myself in a position where I had a Sega Saturn, and I believe I would have had a, let's see, what else would have happened that year? I ended up I had a Sega Saturn that year. I had a Sony PlayStation, and yes, a Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and a Nintendo 64. Because that was one thing that kind of threw me for a loop. I had bought a Nintendo 64. And I still had a Game Boy and stuff like that. But I do remember that it was just one of those things that, was kind of crazy. I do remember in 1996, though, and this is just for my reference, I remember the Virtual Boy, the Jaguar, the 3DO, Sega CD, 32X, and CDI were all taken. They were out of consideration. They were out of the market. Now, where this all plays in line goes into the story about Super Mario 64. When Super Mario 64 came out, Square had a dispute with Nintendo, and they were basically like, fuck Nintendo, we're going to go make Final Fantasy VII for PlayStation. Enough said about that, that's well and done. Now, getting to the Nintendo 64, my Super Nintendo at that time, I had put it up, because I wasn't dealing with any 2D graphics or anything like that. So I was kind of like, what am I doing here? And the further and further I got into things, Street Fighter Alpha 2 came out that year, so I was heavy into Street Fighter. So I was Hadouken, Alexis Lugan, whatever the fuck that sound is he makes. Resident Evil came out that year. Tekken 2, Fighting Vipers, Panzer Dragoon, Fighters Mega Mix. There were enough games coming out at that time that I didn't have to even bother. Hell, Quake was even out. Quake, Parappa the Rapper, Tomb Raider, Soul Itch, and that's Tomb Raider on both systems, PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Command and Conquer was doing its thing out there. Guardian Heroes, Knights. So I can tell you this, Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation Plus for Nintendo 64 with the limited games that were available, all three of those systems took over my life, and then I was heavy in the arcade scene. We was playing Daytona, let's race. And Area 51 with the light gun, the blicky, boop, boop, boop. And no matter what went on, it was just like, hey, not everybody's doing too well here with the Super Nintendo. Because if I remember correctly, everybody had a PlayStation, you had a Game Boy, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, Resident Evil was heavy, Tekken 2, and Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 was so deep that it overshadowed Super Mario RPG. I was already done with my Super Nintendo at that point. I don't even think I was still concentrating on anything for it. Like I said, I think I packed it up or gave it away or something. But the thing that always bothered me about Super Mario RPG also was the price. Back then, that game was like $70, $80 back then. And it's just too much. Now, here's another funny story that goes along with this, and I like this part because it kind of messed with me for a little bit. I own these Super Nintendo Classics. I bought a Super Nintendo Classic. It came out in September 2017. I think I bought 2 of them over the last 4 or 5 years. I bought them. And I have not once or any time been interested in playing Super Mario RPG. Then all of a sudden, they announced the June 2023 remake of Super Mario RPG. And I was like, wow, I've skipped this game. I've moved away from it quite a few times, and I just didn't have a use for it because, like I said, there's nothing that's continued about it. So I was like, okay, why play it? And now there's coming a remake in November, so I'm definitely going to jump on that. But that's an interesting tidbit about my video game history because people that know me know that I'm so technical. You would think that I played every freaking version of this or that, and come to find out, this was one of the ones that slipped through the cracks. And with me saying that, it was just the elements of me playing in Mario. It took me years to play Paper Mario because I didn't like that setup. Mario is a different thing for me. The Raving Rabbids games were good with Mario, and it was situational stuff with Mario besides Mario Party, Mario Kart, and things that I am well versed in. I kind of stay away from. So on that note, I'm JR, and I just wanted to tell you the quick bit of why I never played Super Mario RPG and why I'll be playing it soon. Either I may play it on the Super Nintendo, or I could play it on the original on the Switch or somewhere else. But I may jump into it. If I don't jump into it and wait till the new game comes, it'll be because of the authority of other people giving me information on not to play it. And lastly, check out the show. Thank you guys for listening. Been really cool covering all these different little aspects, doing the interviews, moving the show around in different areas. It's been really fun. So I want to thank you all for that. And once again, I'm JR from West Virginia Uncommonplace. Like, subscribe, listen to us on any pod player that you listen to, and get involved with us at wvuncommonplace@gmail.com. Let us know where you're coming from, how you listen, and where you like to listen, and what you want to hear more about.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at oncommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.